Sorry, Daredevil, I love you, but you no longer have the best hallway sequence. That goes to the Guardians of the Galaxy.
We'll all fly away together. Into the forever. In a beautiful sky.
The much anticipated Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 has finally released. The amount of stuff this movie had to go through. I mean, it went through the writer and director getting fired, rehired, COVID, delays. It was supposed to kick off the multiverse saga. It didn't do that, but now it's finally here. And yes, this movie is once again written and directed by James Gunn, and this is his swan song in the MCU before he finally goes over and fully fixes DC. And there have been a lot of eyeballs on this movie because a lot of people have been saying that if this movie is not amazing, then that's going to be it for them, for the MCU, because there's just been too many subpar or bad projects in recent years. So there was a lot of pressure on this movie. But guys, so good. Now, James Gunn said that this is the conclusion to the story that he began telling 9 years ago, and you can feel that just from the way this film starts. Now, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies always start with a fun opening credit dance number where a pop song plays and it's just like really funny. But this film's version of that opening is just not the same. It's a lot more somber, and you immediately get the sense that this is a concluding chapter and that it's gonna be darker and not as fun as the previous two. And that is true to an extent. James Gunn still injects the perfect amount of humor into this film. He is the best at balancing it. Everyone else has tried to copy him with the jokes coming in at the butt of serious moments and kind of ruining them. James Gunn is the only person who has figured out how to make the jokes work without ruining the serious nature of a scene. But this film is a lot more serious than the other two, and it is a lot darker and more mature in the story it's telling. In fact, it's one of, if not the darkest MCU film. It's definitely up there with Infinity War, but just due to the nature of some of the things this movie does and shows, it might just take the cake for darkest MCU film. You guys all know this already. It's in the marketing, front and center, and James Gunn has been talking about it nonstop for a while. This movie tells the story of Rocket Raccoon and how he went from being this little baby raccoon into the character we know him to be. And James Gunn does not hold back with this. Yes, a lot of it is off screen, but during the actual flashback sequences, which it flashes back to very regularly throughout the movie, the things that you can see and the things that are implied in those scenes is deeply emotional and kind of hard to watch. And I'm amazed James Gunn got away with some of what he got away with. And I can safely say that I don't think kids are going to like this one. So parents, be warned. You might have to watch this one before you take your kids to see it to see if they can handle it, because a lot of people are going to struggle with some of what is shown in this film, even though it's amazing. But it is a beautiful story, and it is the highlight and the standout of this film. James Gunn has said that this particular story is the reason he felt he needed to make Volume 3, which is probably part of the reason that story is so amazing, because he really made sure it was a 10 out of 10. And what's even better is it goes back and retroactively improves the first two movies even more because of how much added context you have that helps explain every single word Rocket says in those previous two movies. You do, however, have to be ready for the fact that Rocket is in a much different place in this. If you're expecting him to feel like he was in Volume 1 and Volume 2, where he's that sarcastic dick that you love, he's really not that. With just the emotional state he's in this film, he's a lot more serious and he is very sad. And prepare to cry. I cried like full on, like 3 times in this movie, like actual like tears, and I had to wipe them away. In fact, there was one scene where something really cool was happening, but I couldn't see it because my eyes were so glazed over. And Rocket's story happens because of the character of the High Evolutionary, who is the villain of this film. So let's talk about the High Evolutionary, because one thing that Marvel has always been criticized for is their villains. And I can see people not liking the High Evolutionary. I personally really loved him for the story that was being told. I think that he'll get a lot of criticism for either being one note or yelling a lot. And to address the second point, yeah, he does yell a lot. Like, he almost yells a distracting amount of times. But you understand why the character is yelling and why he's doing this, and I get it, so I never had a complaint with it. And as to address the one-note allegations, I don't think he's one note. But at the same time, I don't think James Gunn wanted you to like him. He has a goal, right? As he says in the trailer, he wants to create perfect society, and they build upon that a couple times, and he explains it, and different characters explain it a couple times of what his mission is and why he's doing what he's doing. But at no point do they ever want you to feel for this character. He is vile, he's disgusting, he's despicable, you want him to die, you want to jump through the screen to kill him yourself. But that doesn't mean he's one note. And in fact, I think that he had to be how he is for this story to work. I think that the High Evolutionary, as we got him, had to be exactly how he is, or else this film would not work as well. And he is played brilliantly. In terms of performances, it's great all around. But Chukwudi Iwuji plays this character, and that has to be a hard character to play. Like, your character is just abusing a raccoon for most of your screen time. But he was previously in Peacemaker, and it was actually working on that with James Gunn that got him the job for this film. The character who has been actually getting a lot of hate in the reviews and has been criticized as like the one bad thing about this movie is Adam Warlock. And I get it. And it's a complicated situation with Adam Warlock, because James Gunn has previously said Adam Warlock's like a big baby in this film. And he is. And they address, again, they address why he is the way he is. There's a whole scene that's kind of built around Adam Warlock's behavior, and it's a big part of his character in the film is the fact that he kind of whines a lot, and he just seems really spoiled, and he doesn't seem like that badass comic book character that we all know him to be. He's a pawn for people. He's like a bounty hunter. In fact, the reason he comes in contact with the Guardians at all is because he's on a mission that involves him being at nowhere, and the Guardians have to fight him, and that's all I'm going to say because I don't want to get into specifics. So one other character that I feel is important to single out and talk about here is Gamora. So because due to Endgame's time travel, there's a Gamora who's now in the main timeline roaming about, which means she has no relationship to the Guardians of the Galaxy. The only one she knows is Nebula. And that puts her in a really interesting place when she has to join, or not join, but when she has to work with the rest of the Guardians throughout this film. I mean, the first one and most obvious one is that Star-Lord is in love with this woman, but this woman has no clue who he is. And Gunn is able to put an interesting little twist on the will they, won't they, and actually pick up some of where Star-Lord was in Infinity War and Endgame in a really clever way. And then there's her very interesting dynamic with Nebula, because she knows Nebula, but the Nebula she knew was a different Nebula. They kind of know each other, but this Nebula now, like the main Nebula, is a full-on Guardian, and she's not an anti-hero or a villain anymore. And now it's flipped, because Gamora's the Ravager. She's the one out in space, kind of just doing her own thing and living her own life. And it gives us such an interesting characterization for Gamora, where she's a lot meaner, more brutal, more violent, and it catches a lot of the characters off guard with just the way she behaves. Because it's the same character, but also different. So Gunn got to write her and play with her differently. And it really worked for me. And as for the rest of the Guardians, they all have a standout moment in this film. It doesn't feel like previous installments where certain characters are sidelined and only here because they need to be here. Every character has one or two very big time to shine moments. I think Drax and Mantis have some great ones, but my favorite is Groot. Groot has some moments in this, and one in particular that was so awesome and so badass that I wish we could have seen this earlier. And there's this moment where the Guardians of the Galaxy have to clear a hallway of enemies because they need to get across it, and it's the only way to get there. And it might just be the best action sequence in the MCU. And the needle drop during that scene takes the cake. Is probably the best needle drop in Guardians of the Galaxy history. In fact, all the needle drops in this are great, and we're 3 for 3 on awesome mixes. I don't even know if I can pick a favorite, because I was going to say this was my least favorite awesome mix, but then I look back at the track list, I'm like, no, those are all bangers. This is the most personal Guardians of the Galaxy story, because they're not really guarding the galaxy in this. They are fighting a personal mission for themselves. And this is not an exaggeration when I say that over half of this film, the first 2 acts of this film, are essentially a fetch quest to get something that another Guardian needs. And I know saying that most of this is a fetch quest makes it seem like filler that just drags on, but that is not true at all. This movie is so wonderfully paced, and yes, you could cut out some jokes. You could cut out some of the James Gunn friend and family cameos if you wanted, but they all work in the movie, and this movie does not feel too slow, but it also does not feel too fast, and that's the more important one. And the actual ending to this film is not all how I would have expected it to end. I probably could have listed off like 10 or 15 endings before the one we got. But having sat on it and having, because I wrote this review last night, but I have now had the evening of yesterday and all night to sleep on it and think about it. It's the perfect way to end this storyline, and it will leave you satisfied. That's what I'll say. Yeah, I love this film. It's one of those movies that left me so emotionally satisfied that I don't even want to nitpick it. Like, I could find something to complain about. I could find something to nitpick, but I just don't want to. Like, it's too perfect in my eyes to even try to pull it apart and find the flaws with it. And it's nice to finally have a Marvel movie that's not concerned about setting up the next decade of projects. This film is purely a conclusion to the Guardians of the Galaxy storyline. Nothing more, nothing less. And once again, because I feel like praising it some more, Rocket's story is maybe the best piece of writing within the MCU. So I have only done this with one Marvel film before. And it's crazy to think that I'm about to do it again. I didn't think I'd see the day. Everyone has been saying that this is the best Marvel movie since Avengers Endgame. I respectfully disagree, because Endgame's not that great. I think that this is the best Marvel film since 2008. Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, abso-fucking-lutely, gets an A+. My friend put it really well, and I'm not quoting him entirely because I don't want to read the whole thing, but just a section of the little review he left of this movie says that this reminded him of why he loves going to these movies in the first place, and that is the best way to put it. This movie has that old Marvel magic, and it feels like it's so full of passion. They really took their time to make a great film, and it reminds me of the Infinity Saga in a way, but a lot more sad. The characters are great, they all have a time to shine, the villain works, the story is heartfelt, and Rocket Raccoon's story in particular is deeply emotional and very heartbreaking and so beautifully done. But there you guys go, that is my non-spoiler review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I will see you tomorrow for the spoiler review, so definitely hit the subscribe button and click on the bell icon so you get notified when that drops. Also, if you have seen Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, let me know your non-spoiler thoughts down in the comments below. If there's spoilers, I'm deleting the comment. Sorry, I'm not dealing with that. Also, leave a like on this video because that would be awesome. That would be much appreciated, and I would love you for that. So I will see you guys for the spoiler review. That's going to be it. Have a great day, guys.